Recording now. There we go. My apologies, everyone. Okay. So it is being recorded, and this will be uploaded to our Trails YouTube page. We encourage everyone to ask questions in the chat box, and during the last 15 minutes of this presentation, our presenter, Anona, will be answering your questions. As always, please be respectful, and any form of hate speech or derogatory remarks will not be tolerated. Anyone doing so will be removed from this event. With that being said, I will pass it off to my co-host, Polymat, and then she will pass it off to Anona. So thank you so much, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, Sage. I'm thrilled to be joining today from the Cowichan Tribes territory located on Vancouver Island. I am joining Trails BC as a part of this grant to support research in decolonizing trails and finding opportunities to enhance inclusion and active transportation. And from here, I'll pass it on to Anona, who will give a brief introduction and lead us into a wonderful discussion about her experiences in the land and her responsibility as an Okanagan woman in regards to traditional harvesting practices. Thank you.
Limlimt, thank you. I always like to introduce myself in my traditional language first, just so you can hear what it sounds like, and I will translate that into English. In chai squeeze sknitterman, isen summit squeeze Anona Campe, kentel some Penticton. Stimtima tui Rachel Paul, Natlin Kikwat tui Basil Paul tel some Penticton. Skilui Todd Kampe, Nasht Casasilis Quesquasia, Brandon Tristan. I said hello, good day, my relatives, my friends. My traditional name is translated to Buttercup. A buttercup is a tiny little yellow flower that blooms here early in the springtime in this territory. My name was gifted to me by Tui Iswatwasat, my late auntie. My English name is Anona Campe, and I'm from Penticton, the Penticton Indian Band. The Penticton Indian Band is one of the bands within the Okanagan Nation in NEIHR territory. I am the granddaughter of the late Rachel and the late Basil Paul from the Penticton Indian Band. I married Todd Kampe, and together we have two sons, Brandon and Tristan. I was always taught to introduce myself this way, to share with you who I am by explaining what lands I belong to and who my family is. And when I share that information with you, I introduce you to my ancestry, my lineage. My elders tell me to speak my language, no matter how little of it I may know. And when I do that, I call on my ancestors to stand beside me. And I think that's really powerful. So thanks for inviting me to join you here today on this platform. I want to start by just explaining the work that I do within the Okanagan Nation. So about 6 years ago, I started working for School District 67 here in Penticton and Summerland. And my role was cultural coordinator. So it was my responsibility to include Indigenous perspectives, more specifically Okanagan perspectives in the school curriculum. And I did that by bringing in local presenters from Penticton and within the nation to do presentations in schools. And when COVID hit, it got to the point where we couldn't have some of these presenters, mostly because a lot of them were elders, and this pandemic was affecting the elderly. And so we started turning more and more to me to be doing these presentations. And so I do many different presentations in schools, namely storytelling. I teach students how to drum and sing, how to bead. I teach them about our true history and colonization, residential schools. I also do sessions where I bring students out on the land to do learning on the land. And that's my favorite kind of learning. is to get outside and to engage our senses and to connect with Tumkulauch and Tumich, with the land and all the living things. And so currently I work in School District 23 now, which is Kelowna, West Kelowna, Lake Country area of our nation, doing the same thing. Not as full-time as I was with School District 67, because I am also in school full-time learning the Okanagan language. And I was sharing with Sage before everyone got on, I feel like I'm a baby in the language, and I'm really learning from some incredible fluent speakers and knowledge keepers. So that's incredible. I am part of the very first cohort in this country, in all of Canada, who will earn my degree in my Indigenous language. So hashtag grad 2023. So that's really exciting. But with this work, I have had run-ins on the land with folks who are not only they're not from our nation, but they're not from Turtle Island. Their ancestry, I should say, is not from Turtle Island. And so I'm going to share some of those experiences with you. So with part of the work that I do, I would go out on the land to scout different areas to ensure that these places were safe, where a bus could get in and out, and also where a bus had room to turn around, where the students would be safe, so they weren't right off the side of a road, or they weren't in any treacherous areas where there were cliffs or any potential accidents that could happen. So it was my responsibility to find areas where the students would be safe. And in a lot of cases, I was going to bring them to these places to do either learning from the land, where I was going to share specific species of plants that grow and talk to them about traditional harvesting practices, when and where to harvest these things, what they would be utilized for, what time of year, what to be looking for on the land in order to practice that harvesting and so forth. But also, I would be there to share with them how to harvest some of these medicines right from the land, and to bring them back to their space at their schools to prepare them. So whether we were collecting rose hips to make rose hip jam, or we were collecting sage to put together bundles of medicine to be used as gifts, I was teaching them ways to be ethically responsible to the land and to live in sustainability. So I'm going to share with you some examples of run-ins that I've had on the land. So one such run-in happened, I was looking for a safe place to harvest sage. And I knew all the good places to harvest sage in Penticton, but School District 67 is also in Summerland. And so I needed to find a spot where a bus could get in safely and turn around, and where students would be safe, but also an area that was abundant in sage where we could potentially harvest. And so I should mention that I have dogs, and sometimes they bark. So I have a dog that's growling at another dog, and I apologize for that. Anyway, back to my story. I was really in the middle of nowhere. And while I was in the middle of nowhere searching for and scouting for an area to harvest sage, I saw in the distance two white, what appeared to be men coming towards me. And I remember thinking when I saw them, sheer anxiety and panic come over me, because I had neglected to tell anyone where I was. I hadn't told anyone that I was on this excursion. I hadn't let anyone know where I was going to be or how long I was going to be. And something had come over me where I felt afraid. And as an Indigenous woman, I do not have the luxury or the privilege to put myself in those kinds of situations. There is an epidemic in this country with respect to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and also LGBTQ2+ community. And so as an Indigenous woman, I am 16 times more likely to be abducted, raped, and murdered. And I have to continuously remind myself of those statistics before I venture out in the backcountry. And so I see these men and I quickly get out my cell phone and I call my husband. And thank goodness I had cell service because he answered my call. And now my husband is a busy man as well. He works full time as well. And so I was praying that he answer the phone. And he did. And I said to him, track my phone. Before I said hi, before I explained anything, I said, track my phone. And of course, he's like, what's going on? Where are you? I said, I quickly start to explain the scenario. And we have that app where our kids have the Find My iPhone app. And so we all have it on our phones. So of course, he tracked my phone. I said, you know where I am now. And I don't plan on running away and never coming home again. So I got past these gentlemen in the trail. They kept going. And when they were kind of out of sight, I ran to my car. I got in and I started to cry. And I remember feeling really foolish that I had put myself in that situation. But that's our reality. And that's something that we have to consider. So I need to remember that I have to tell people where I am, and also to even include someone with me on these excursions out on the land when I'm scouting safe places for harvest. So again, I was out on the land searching for another place for harvest, and I had remembered that there is a provincial park just off the highway in between Summerland and Peachland. And there's two campgrounds that are kind of near one another. And I had gone in there thinking, oh, a bus could easily get in here and turn around. And while I know that a lot of this park is pretty manicured and not a lot of these species are indigenous to this place, I think there's a trail in here. And so again, I was on my own looking at this trail when a ranger spotted me from the park, and he approached me and said, he greeted me warmly and asked me what I was doing there and if he could help me. And I was excited to share with him what it was that I was planning to do. I'm looking for a spot to harvest sage. Like, do you even have sage in here? I was looking at your trail. I'm not 100% sure, and he stood there and listened to me, and he proceeded to educate me on the rules about what it means to take anything out of a provincial park. And he said, you can't take anything out of this park, let alone bring other people here to take anything out of this park. And I stood back and I listened to this man educate me. And I had to be patient and I had to bite my tongue. When he was done, I proceeded to explain to him who I was. What I mean by that is I introduced him to who my ancestors are. My ancestors are the original people of this place. Our people have been here in this territory since time immemorial, which means the beginning of people in this place. I began to explain to him the protocols that have been set out for me as an Okanagan woman, and my responsibility to harvest from the land, and then to turn around and provide that harvest for my people, for our women, our men, our youth, and our elders. I educated this man about what my responsibility was to be ethically responsible to harvesting from this land, because according to our stories, this land is a part of who I am as a person, as a woman, and I have an ethical responsibility to contribute to this system of Tamich, or all living things. And that, yes, I would and could come and take from my traditional territory, so long as I was following the protocols that were set out for me since the beginning of time. Those protocols are: one, only take what you need. I'm only going to take what I need because I need to leave some behind in case someone else wants some. And not just people, other animals, birds, insects, other plants that rely on those species for their survival. Number 2, if I do take something, I need to make sure that I try to use as much of what I take as I possibly can so there's no waste. Number 3, if I don't use it, then I have to give it back. Giving back is called reciprocity. If I'm eating an apple, for example, I don't eat the core, right? Those hard bits in the middle, the seeds, the stem. To give back, I could compost the core. It would turn itself into nutrient-rich soil that I could then give back to my garden. I could even propagate the seeds and make another tree. That's a reciprocal relationship. I take, but I also give, right? So when I shared that with him, he got pretty flustered and red in the face and stumbled over his words. And he said, well, I don't know anything about your customs, your protocols, or your culture. I'm not even from here. And I said, that's okay. That's also part of my responsibility as an Okanagan person is to educate and to share and to teach. And I'm happy to share with you our protocols and to spread that knowledge. Knowledge means nothing if you don't share it with someone. And that's what my mentors have taught me. There was another instance where I was with my mentor, Richard Armstrong, and he spent many years teaching me and bringing me out on the land and bringing me to some of our most sacred sites. And we were at one of our sacred sites called Coyote Rock, which is tucked away really on the Penticton Indian Band lands. And you have to be invited to even go to this place. And we had arrived and he was showing us around as students and teaching us some of the lessons from this sacred site. And we got in his vehicle to leave. And as we were leaving, we were coming down the trail and it's really only one lane to get in and out. And then a van was coming up the other way and they kind of met together and had to stop and both back away to maneuver past each other. And as we maneuvered past this van, there was a woman inside, non-Indigenous, non-community member. And my mentor said, hello, are you lost? And she said, no, so-and-so told me I could come here with my dogs. And we had remembered while we were up at this sacred site, the mess of dogs seemed to be all over the place. And I wondered whose dogs are all the way up here, you know, leaving their mess behind. And my mentor taught me something about being humble and about being patient in that moment. While I felt a bit angered by the fact that here this non-community member was coming to one of our sacred sites and leaving her dog's mess behind, he said to her, well, we'll let it go this time, but maybe you could find another place to bring your dogs for their exercise. And then we left. And so he taught me what it means to be a patient teacher in that moment. So here on these unceded traditional and ancestral territory of the Si'ilch Okanagan people, I have been taught by my mentors, elders and fluent speakers that I have a responsibility as an Okanagan woman to remain deeply rooted in this place. I have to get out on the land. This land is lonesome for our people. It wants us to be in these places to visit. But when we do that, we also have to remind ourselves about our ethical responsibility to this place, to take care of it and to always follow those protocols. So those are some of the things that I wanted to share. I'm mindful of the time. I think that we had until 4:30, but I could be wrong, and maybe Sage can let me know that. I can talk forever. You just let me know and I will share more stories. So Sage, how are we doing?
We are doing good. I know that the last 15 minutes we were wanting to do a Q&A. So yeah, if you got some more stories up your sleeve, I think you probably got some time for another 2 or so.
Okay. So speaking of the dog issue, we do have the channel walking path here on Penticton Indian Band lands. And we have a real issue with folks utilizing that trail with their dogs off leash. And when some of our people confront some of these folks with their dogs off leash, they're usually met with resistance. Folks say, I've been coming here for years, I've never had a problem. Some of our own people can't even use that trail because they're bombarded with the dogs, with the mess, for example, which is extreme. For anyone that's ever used that walking trail, you know that there's dog mess all up and down that trail. And also with dogs who are on a leash, who don't do well with other dogs, are being almost attacked by these dogs that are off leash. And so our people are almost tasked with the responsibility of continuously having to be patient with these non-members who are utilizing this trail, but also abusing it. And so just like there are bylaws in the city of Penticton where you have to have your dog on a leash, those bylaws are here in our community as well, the Penticton Indian Band. Now, the problem is we have bylaws, yet we don't have the capacity to enforce these bylaws. Because to be honest, who wants that job? Who wants to be the bylaw officer for the Penticton Indian Band? That would be a hard job. So I like to pass that on and spread that news that this is not an off-leash walking trail. If you are going to utilize that trail, you do need to have your dog on a leash, and you do need to clean up after your dog, just like it is anywhere else, right? We all have that responsibility. I know when I take my dogs for walks throughout our neighborhood, I always carry the little bags so that I can pick up after them. And that's everyone's responsibility as dog owners to take care of that and to manage that. So yeah, those are the stories that I kind of had prepared. I guess I would also add that my responsibility to my ethical responsibility to this environment is an inherent responsibility, right? I inherited this responsibility through my ancestry, and our people have proven that we have lived in sustainability in this place for thousands upon thousands of years, right? History has shown us that. And we continue that responsibility by getting out on the land to hunt and fish and to harvest roots, berries, and medicines from the land, so long as we continuously follow those protocols, and also continuously teach our young to follow those protocols, and on that goes through our ancestry. So thanks so much for giving me space to share. And I would love to hear conversation or your questions. Limlimt, thank you.
Well, I just want to say on behalf of Trails, thank you so much for your amazing words, because those stories were really beautiful, and I'm very grateful to be able to have heard those. So yeah, I think we'll start some Q&A, and then Anona, I'll just let you take the lead on that and answer those questions.
Hi, Jonathan.
Sorry, I can maybe help facilitate these questions here. So I see Damon in this Q&A portion He's curious where as to learning about language and how it impacts your relationship to land. What are your thoughts on that?
Can you repeat the question? Or, oh, is it in the chat?
Yeah, so he's curious, as you learn more about your own language, how does that impact your relationship to the land?
Oh, it's incredible. So what I'm learning now with the Okanagan language is I'm learning, like, we all know words like in our language, but our instructors are breaking those words down to the root. And I'm really learning how it really paints a picture in your mind. The visuals and the imagery that come along with the language is like a moving picture in your mind. So like even the word for land, timkulauch in our language, when we hear that word timkulauch, we all know that we're talking about land. But there are other parts of that word that have such a deeper meaning. The first part of the word comes from the word timich, which means all living things, essentially. But we're connected to that as well, right? So timich is the plants, the animals, right? The insects, the things that live in the water, all those beings that are living. And we are part of that. We're timich as well. And in our traditional stories called chaptikl, we understand that we come from those things. We were literally torn from those things. The creator had said in the beginning that the timich was perfect, right? Because plants and animals are born with the instincts to survive. And that the creator was going to take a piece of each of those beings to make us, the people, but that we would be pitiful in comparison, right? Because we would be born without the instincts to survive. In fact, it would take years to teach us the difference between right and wrong and the difference between what it means to be safe versus unsafe. We would be born naked. We wouldn't be able to speak. We wouldn't have teeth. We wouldn't be able to walk or stand or even hold our heads up, right? That's how pitiful we are. But it would be up to me, all the living things, to ensure that we had the best chance for survival. So that first part of the word is talking about how we are connected to this system. We are a part of it, that we are related to it, right? Those are our relatives. The same way we each have a mom and a dad, grandparents, aunties, uncles, cousins, children, grandchildren, right? The timich is that to us, and it continuously takes care of us. So that's the first part of the word for land. The next part of the word is talking about the physical earth itself, right? The dirt, the sand, the gravel, the rocks, the mud, the clay. The next part of the word talks about round and spinning, right? That cyclical, that cycle, right? So this means a few things. Long before any scientist ever told us that the earth was round and spinning, we knew. It's literally embedded in our ancient language. But also that all things revolve around cycle, right? So we have a cycle, a calendar that we follow based on the 13 moons. And every time the moon changes, something changes on the land, right? So that we know that, oh, we can harvest roots now. Oh, the berries are ready for harvest. We can go hunting now. We can fish now, right? All these things happen in a cycle. And then it starts again. When the buttercups bloom in the spring, that cycle returns itself. Right? So it's talking about that all those different parts of that one word are talking about our ethical responsibility to this place. So yes, to answer your question, I'm learning a lot about our connection to the land through our language.
That's so beautiful. It just reiterates that each part has a story and it is connected and it unravels teachings and things that can guide us along the way. We have another question here. Someone's interested hearing your thoughts about recreational infrastructure. So trails, bike paths, shelters that can support Indigenous communities and or other infrastructure, and how you might view the different priorities and protocols. So how can maybe traditional Indigenous connection with modern recreation and other maybe more formal trails as we know today.
Yeah, I would love to see more of that, because lots of our own people will go utilizing these trails for biking, or skiing, or cross-country skiing, or I would love to see interpretive signage, right, that shares our true history, about our language, about the connection to place, in our traditional territory, as it is all throughout Turtle Island or North America. Places that have had traditional names for thousands upon thousands of years have been changed to English, and in most cases named after white settlers. And I would love, and I know a lot of our people would love to see these places be called what they have always been called in our language, right? And so maybe we do need signage that shares that history of why that place is called that in our language. You know, maybe it's named after an animal, or maybe it's named after a specific plant that grows in that area, or maybe it's named after some part of our story, right?
And I guess another part of this question is, do you think this might conflict with Indigenous protocols or priorities? For example, having those bike paths or shelters, or do you think the signages will kind of help maybe bridge the two together?
I think as long as you collaborate with the Indigenous folks whose traditional territories you are planning to do this potential infrastructure, those folks need to be included in that planning process. I think that if I mean, it's been proven, if you just waltz right in and expropriate land and plop something there that wasn't there before without the consultation of the Indigenous peoples, you're going to meet it with resistance. So always include the voice of the Indigenous folks whose traditional territories you're planning to do this infrastructure in.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is greatly leading into a couple of other questions. So I guess we're going to pick this a little bit apart. So again, someone is recognizing that these places and spaces, mountains, lakes, streams, do have colonized names. And so, for example, you mentioned, what might the process be as for maybe a settler who's looking to change these names? I know you mentioned collaborating with the First Nations, but building off another question is, how do you do if there's multiple nations, and where do those, if they want to be included or not included? So I guess maybe going into maybe the process or the protocol or best practices, if you have knowledge on that. Or
I can only speak for Okanagan because that's where I'm from and the place that I know. But here in our nation, you would absolutely have to connect with the folks from that territory in order to get it right. I see that Jonathan Kruger is on, or maybe he was anyway. He's a great person to ask about our place names. In fact, a lot of the things that I share are things that he has shared with me. He's brought me out on the land to tour our boundaries and to share story and significant sites, and to share with us what those places are called. And so, yeah, include the people from that nation in those talks, because our places, we have names for everything. That's how we knew we were within the boundaries of our nation, is because of all these markers that were left behind by Coyote. Coyote is our trickster, mostly in our stories, but Coyote was also sent to us to transform the people-eating monsters, right? Nowadays, the people-eating monsters would be considered things like depression and anxiety and suicide, addiction, shame, right? So Coyote was sent to transform those things, and Coyote did just that. He transformed them into the beautiful landscape that we know and see today as the Okanagan Nation's territory. And he left markers behind that have stories attached to them. These stories always have a lesson, a moral, a teaching that helps guide us and live in this place in an ethical way. And these places always have a name. And those names are important to keep our culture alive. And some of our own people don't know the names of our places. And we need to get back to sharing that and teaching that, not only for our own people, but for everyone who wants to call this place home.
Oh, that's wonderful. So another question here. So does the Okanagan Nation do workshops for non-Indigenous residents to learn more about the traditional knowledge?
I don't know if the Okanagan Nation Alliance does. I really don't know. I have been sharing what I can with different, not only with schools, but with different entities as well. Folks have reached out to me. For example, the South Okanagan Immigration Society has reached out to me to do some sessions with folks who want to become Canadian citizens. They have to learn about the Indigenous people from that part of the territory where they want to live. And so I've gone in to do sessions with them, and it's been incredible. I was invited to speak with the road builders of BC, and I did a session on colonization. I shared with them a presentation I put together on colonization, sharing true and ugly history that they never learned in school, but that really happened in this country. And it was eye-opening for them. Most of them, you know, they're in their 50s and later, had no idea of some of the things that Indigenous people have gone through and continue to go through to this day. So I do offer sessions. Maybe I can put in the chat my email if you wanted to reach out to me. Is that okay? Okay.
I think that was another question. If they had further information, or if they needed to connect, what's the best way to learn more or keep in touch?
So there's my email. You can email me for sessions, but if Jonathan is still on, I wonder if Sodexo offers such sessions.
I believe he might be. He was posting a couple of questions here. But we have tons of questions. I will jump into the next question here. So going back to trail issues, for example, the dog issues, how would you think it's trail behavior issues can be best managed? I know you mentioned maybe not the best to have maybe the bylaw or some enforcement, but maybe alternative ways.
What's the question? What did you say?
Yeah. So how do you think issues of trail behavior can be best managed? So going back to like the dog issues and building off of your discussion with like the bylaw as well.
I would say treat this place the way you would treat your own backyard, right? You would never not pick up after your dog, right? For fear that you would step in mess and have to worry about cleaning that up, right? Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to be a guest or a visitor in someone else's place, the way I would walk into someone else's house, I would treat it in such a way where I felt I would feel good about the way I'm treating it, with respect. And also our protocol of reciprocity, right? If you're ever going to take something from the land, whether you're hunting or fishing or harvesting from the land, fix your mind, think good thoughts, and leave an offering. And that offering can look like anything. Here in the Okanagan, we use traditional tobacco, sage. If you're really stuck, you can even use some water from your bottle of water. But when you fix your mind and think good thoughts and you leave that offering before you take something, right? That's reciprocity. So follow our protocols and treat this place the way you would treat your own place, and the way you would expect others to treat your place if they were visiting.
Hi.
Hi, Jonathan.
Sorry, I didn't know how to use this this Eventbrite. It's one I do Zoom and Teams and this is a new one, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I was trying to type, and I'm like, I'm really bad typer, so thank you for your wonderful stories and words, and I'm so proud of you, Anona. And I'm just so glad that you're sharing your knowledge, and you care about the land and everything you do with the youth, and it's amazing.
Mm.
But I did ask a question about like I love the trails. I love the parks, and one day we're going to sit down with the government and everybody, and then we're going to be planning because we weren't involved in all the parks, the BC parks, the federal parks, and one day we will be even though it's already kind of done, but there's things like signage and getting our people to work in those areas so we can, they're already out in the hills anyways, so why not have them working there? And I really love what you said about connecting. It's our responsibility to help people learn how to be connected to the land. And parks is I think is a good way of reconnecting to the land and keeping us in a good state of our beings,
Mhm.
and that we do really good things. And I also think that there needs to be rules in the parks and the trails, because I go up the 3x Mice, right? I have my mountain bike up there, and I also hunt there. So in the wintering season, that's where the elk like going, right? So it's but you have to be careful with that, because there's a lot of people in those areas, and it's really hard, because it's hard enough already to go hunting. Excuse me, guys, I'm talking here on the webinar, and it's hard enough to hunt in those areas, or when there's people being in recreation. So there's things that we need to figure out as we move forward. But I'm jumping all over the place because I'm all excited. And I wanted your thoughts on how can we recreate some programs with our youth to build some of these trails and these apparatuses. And I know that the youth built some mountain bike trails up in Carcross up in the Yukon, and I love that story so much that I had to drive up there or fly up there and drive over there and go on their mountain bike trails just to support the youth there. And I had to go over there and talk to them and shake their hands and tell me your story. So maybe we can do that one day. And I donate some of my time after work to join the Spirit North program, getting our children into cross-country skiing and mountain biking and hiking, and after school programs. And we want to start building some trails on our reserve, and we have to ask the chief and council, but why not also work with the provincial governments on other parks? I don't know. I just want to know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. Schools are always looking for a way to get students involved, especially outside, and a project that they can work on and be proud of, that they can then turn around and go visit in the spring and the summer and the fall would just be epic. So this is something that could be put forward to school districts. Also youth groups, the band youth groups anyway, for sure. They're always looking for opportunity to get their young ones outside and connecting with the land. But count me in. I'd love to be part of that. Sure.
Right on. I'm going to mute myself. I talk too much, so you gotta be careful here.
Fran wants to ask a question. Fran, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Fran.
Oh, wonderful. That was such a beautiful presentation. And my question is kind of an opinion, but kind of a question.
Okay.
And like I just loved your talk about ethics and protocol and how you treat the land and belong to it. But I can't imagine that us who are not Indigenous could be encouraged to harvest from the land. You know, that kind of breaks my heart to think that 500,000 people would go out in British Columbia and start harvesting, you know, because many of us don't have those ethics and protocols and love for the land. Anyway, it's kind of a question. Maybe you'd like to comment.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you're right. We do live in an era where do we only take what we need? For any of us that went grocery shopping after those floods happened here in this province, we know the answer to that, right? I felt really disappointed when I saw that there was no produce, no dairy, no meat, right? And I remember walking into the grocery store and looking around and just shaking my head. And I thought, seriously, did we not learn from the toilet paper debacle after COVID first hit? Right? And I just threw my hands up and walked out of the grocery store. And of course, we had to rely on our freezers and our cupboards for canned goods. And it's a teaching, though, that as Indigenous people, it is in our blood to treat this land in a sustainable fashion. But it's also in our prophecy to turn around and teach folks that aren't from here about the responsibility to live in this place and sustainability. And we all have an ethical responsibility to this place. Our anthem here in this nation is the Okanagan song, and it's sung completely in the Okanagan language called Nsilchen. When we translate that song into English, it says something like, "We are beautiful because we are Okanagan, because our land is beautiful." What that means is, as long as we do our part to take care of this place where we live and keep it healthy and beautiful, then we will always be healthy and beautiful, right? If we pollute this place, then our bodies would become polluted. Because you think about it, clothing, food, water, shelter, air, it comes from this place where we live. Even look around the space that you're currently sitting in right now. Every single thing in that space at one time or another has come from the land, right? So we have that ethical responsibility to do our part. So I'm not saying that everybody in the province needs to go out and start harvesting. I would say try to connect with local Indigenous folks and knowledge keepers, because there are some of us who are willing to share that knowledge with people. Because as my mentor has always told me, knowledge means nothing if you don't share it with someone. So please use my email, connect with me, and I'll let you know what that looks like. But thanks for your question, Fran.
Oh, thank you. It was very lovely.
Okay, anyone else?
There is a bunch of questions in the chat. I don't know if all those have been answered.
Okay.
Maybe just scroll through there.
Oh, I just clicked the button Q&A. Have all these questions been answered?
We've kind of gone through a few of them. A few of them are a little bit specific. Let's see. A lot of the questions were around signage, around the advice with youth programs, where to get more knowledge. So I think we've captured them all in some way or another, but I feel like they may be more conversations that may be leading into a longer discussion. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot happening in the Okanagan region, and definitely people want to collaborate and connect and really, I guess, do the work in a good way and find more knowledge that's very specific to a project. So
So I would suggest for folks that are interested in signage in, I think I saw someone from Vernon. So in Vernon, that's the northern part of our nation. It's called the Okanagan Indian Band. I would connect with their band office to maybe their lands department to talk to them about signage over there. And really everywhere you go within our territory, like connect with those bands. In West Bank, it's West Bank First Nation, Penticton Indian Band. In Oliver and Osoyoos, it's the Osoyoos Indian Band. Over in the Similkameen, we've got Upper Similkameen and Lower Similkameen. So one is in Headley area over towards Headley, and the other is in Karamias area. Then there's the Upper Nicola over towards like Spachaman in our language. What does that mean? Douglas Lake. Okay, well, thank you so much for inviting me to this session and to share my personal stories and excursions out on the land, and to just really be truthful and honest with you about some of the issues I've personally faced while being out on the land, but also the beauty of being out on the land and the healing that happens. Studies show when you get out in nature and you breathe that fresh air, something physical happens to our bodies that helps us feel good. And it feels good to breathe in all of that beautiful, fresh, clean air from the mountains, especially. And the study is all of that aromatherapy that you're breathing in from the trees and the plants and the soil and the fungus, right? Even the insects, it helps us to heal. And that's a beautiful thing. I'll hand it back to you, Sage. White, lim-limped.
Thank you so much, Anona, for your amazing presentation. Truly just filled my heart, and I just felt like you took us on a journey out there, and like we were going through a hike and just chatting. So I really appreciate that. And yes, I do have some just closing remarks, kind of to let our attendees know. So again, thank you so much, Anona, for being our speaker, and thank you, Polymat, for being my co-host tonight. Anona, you've done amazing work, just sharing your stories with us. And a reminder to everyone that this is being recorded and it will be on our YouTube page. If you would like to support Trails BC, you can become a member, and we'll put our member link. Yep, there we go. Richard's got it. We have our link there. By becoming a member, you assist us in putting together more events like this and help in our advocacy efforts. It really means so much, and you can find us on social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, our YouTube page. And to let everybody know that we also have another webinar next week on February 24th. That is valuing people with disabilities and outdoors. Karen Lay will be our speaker. And on March 8th, we have Indigenous Lens on Land and Inclusion. And we will have 3 speakers, Denise LaCoy, Amber McSwain, and Amiel Flett. So we will also be following up with survey, getting your feedback. And closing off, I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating and being here. And again, thank you so much, Anona, for your amazing stories and just being able to be connected. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I have to get to class now, but
Okay, yes, so sorry about that. And I think we'll, oh yeah, sorry, you go ahead, Anona. We'll just be adding any information in the chat box for anybody else looking to